What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Young Guns podcast. Guys, it's time to talk about the newest team in the NHL, the Seattle Kraken. In their second season in the NHL, things are going very well for the Seattle Kraken. They are currently third place in the Pacific. They won 7 straight games in 41 games. They have 25 wins, 12 losses, 4 OT losses, 54 points, and are plus 25. They are 10-8-2 at home and 15-4-2 away. Shane Wright, unfortunately, is not with the Seattle Kraken anymore after winning gold with Team Canada at the 2023 World Juniors. He was sent back down to the Kingston Frontenacs, where he was then traded to the Windsor Spitfires.
Yep.
So, in the development of Shane Wright, finally we have a conclusion. He will develop in the OHL for the time being, and hopefully he could be a full-time Seattle Kraken player next season. But with that being said, they acquired Eli Tolvanen, which we covered as well. He was an absolute steal for the Seattle Kraken. He's doing fantastic for them. He's a big part and reason why this team is on a 7-game winning streak. And there's also rumors that they may add a captain and a captain in Bo Horvat at the trade deadline if things go well, because we've spoken about this in the past before, that the Seattle Kraken lack in one position, in our opinion, and that is the middle, the center. They have one of
Yeah.
the best winger depth in the league. Defense is looking good. Goalie situation is looking good. But in the middle, that could be a fantastic solution. So, Luca, why are the Seattle Kraken so good?
Well, I think the Seattle Kraken are good because they're able to put the puck in the net, man. They're able to score goals. They're a team that has been very good offensively this season. They've played some really fun, entertaining hockey, and they're getting scoring from everybody, man. And it's a team game. It's a team effort. There's not one guy in particular that's standing out more than the other. They have 11 players on their team currently with 20 or more points. That's amazing. That goes to show you the depth that they have in their squad. And what's interesting about Seattle is that their goaltending has actually not been that great. If you go look at their goaltending, right? They've had 3 goalies play for them this season. They've had Martin Jones, Philip Grubauer, and Joey Daccord. Joey Daccord played 1 game, had a 900 save percentage. Philip Grubauer in 14 games this season is 4-7-1 with an 885 save percentage and no shutouts, right? Martin Jones is 25-3 with an 898 save percentage and 3 shutouts. Martin Jones, I'll be honest, his stats don't really speak to how well he's played. Yes, he's 25-3. His save percentage is very low for a goalie like that, but he's played well. I don't think that his save percentage stats always give the true number as to you know how good he's played, because he's actually played better than that number shows with the 3 shutouts as well. But this is a team that has just overachieved, but they remind me a lot of what Vegas was in their first year, right? A team that's feisty, they're nasty, they're not fun to play against. They've got a lot of guys that are showing what they're capable of doing, and they have a potential Calder Trophy winner in Matty Beniers, who is showing the NHL what type of player he is and how good he actually is. So for me, listen, I'm very impressed with Seattle. Vince Dunn is having a resurgence season for them on the back end. Guys like Burakovsky are leading the team in points. Beniers and Eberle are having really good seasons. It's a very well-rounded team for Seattle. And I can't right now, personally, seeing on how well they're playing, I can't find the weakness. I think the only weakness would maybe be their goaltending situation in terms of, the backup role, where Philip Grubauer really hasn't lived up to that expectation that they expect him to, but Martin Jones has been a blessing in disguise. But in terms of that, I think they've been really good. You mentioned Eli Tolvanen. What a waiver pickup this guy's been, man. What a waiver pickup he's been. That was
6
such a
points in 7
smart
games,
move so
4
far.
goals and 2 assists. He
Yeah.
had 4 points in 13 games with the Nashville Predators.
Yep.
this season. So 2 goals and 2 assists. David Poley, the general manager of the Nashville Predators, said that this could end up being a very big mistake for them. So,
Absolutely.
you know, when he's on a point streak like this and he's only playing third line minutes with Yanni Gord and Oliver Bjorkstrand, that is fantastic. Let me
Yep.
read you their lineup right now. Andre Burakovsky, Matty Beniers, Jordan Eberle. Fantastic first line. Jaden Schwartz, Alex Wenberg, Jared McCann. Good second line. Third line, Eli Tovinen, Yanni Gord, Oliver Bjorkstrand. Fourth line, Brandon Tanev, Ryan Donato, Daniel Sprong, who's having a fantastic season as well. This team, on paper, is one of my favorite teams to watch.
Oh yeah, yeah.
There's so many scoring wingers on this team. It's it's a blessing for them. Seattle, in only their second season, to have a team like this on paper offensively, it's fantastic. And I know a lot of people were were judging their moves in the first year, saying, why aren't they like flipping any of their assets, whatever, because they want to compete, and look at them in year two. Vince Dunn, 30 points in 41 games. He's a defenseman that not a lot of people are talking about. Jordan Eberle, 34 points in 41 games. Matty Beniers, he's the leading candidate to win the Calder, and right behind him is Logan Thompson. So he has 34 points in 41 games. Andre Burakovsky, which was added this offseason and is a Stanley Cup winner with the Colorado Avalanche, is their best player. 35 points, 40 in 41 games. So this is fantastic. Yanni Gordon on the third line, 27 points in 40 games. Jared
Hmm.
McCann, 27 points in 38 games. This is fantastic. There's so many players with over 20 points on this team, and some of them are defensemen. So that's really, fantastic news in terms of the progression. That is great. This year they have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 draft picks in the 2023 draft, which is a stacked draft. They have 3 picks in the second round. One that's owned
Yeah.
by Toronto, the other one that's owned by Winnipeg. And in the fourth round, they have two. One of them is owned by Colorado. And in the sixth round, they have one of them that's owned um, by the Washington Capitals. So, they have other teams' picks. They have their own picks. Like, they have, yeah, they're rich essentially in terms of their assets going to the deadline. I think they could be a big player. I think they could add a guy like Bo Horvat, and the predictions are is that if he does land in Seattle, he will be playing the second line with Jaden Schwartz and Andre Burakovsky, which would be fantastic.
So one thing that's really interesting about Seattle is that they've got a very interesting situation going on. Okay, so right now, according to Cap Friendly, they're projected to have $5.1 million heading into the deadline for cap space, and it's interesting because Chris Drieger may not play this season, but if he does, they're gonna have a very interesting goalie controversy, just because Philip Grubauer has not played well at all. And Martin Jones has had a really good season. And with Chris Drieger, he makes $3.5 million for the next for this season. Next, obviously, he hasn't played a game this year. And Jonas Donskoy, who's currently injured, makes $3.9 million until the end of the season. This is a team that I will not be surprised if they add a forward. I also wouldn't be surprised if they were in the hunt for a defenseman. The reason I say that is because I don't know how serious Seattle is about competing for a Stanley Cup. I don't necessarily believe they have the team to necessarily go ahead and do it.
They're a
But
dark horse at this point, I
but
would say.
they're one of those teams that I'd be interested to see what they're gonna do in terms of adding assets at the deadline. This is a team that has had a lot of interesting pieces, right? They have a lot of guys with modified no trade clauses, which doesn't always help you for the future. They've got a lot of guys on term as well. So I'm curious to see, if they do go for a guy like, let's say, Bo Horvat, or even to some extent, even I would even see a guy like, a good reclamation project for them could be a guy like Jesse Puljujarvi. I wouldn't even be surprised if they were in the hunt for a guy like Max Domi as well from Chicago. This is the team that I think if they add one more forward could definitely be an interesting team to watch. But they've got so many really good, players that are not superstar caliber, but they're also not bad players, right? And
Yeah.
I think, to be honest, we talked about the weak spot. Yes, their forward core has been really good, but imagine adding a defenseman. And the reason I say this is because I honestly believe they should be players, just because I think this guy would change their franchise. I would not be surprised if they called Arizona and said,
Yeah,
you know
that's a good
what?
one.
You know what? Why don't we go after Jacob Chikrin? Now I know the asking price is high, okay? But if Seattle decides, hey, you know what, we're gonna try to go after Jacob Chikrin. Well, now you've got a young decor, right? That's got Vince Dunn on it, who's having a really good year, right? Jacob Chikrin. You've got Adam Larson, who's 30 years old and playing really well. Jamie Alexiak, who's 30 years old and still playing really well. There's your top four with then Justin Schultz as well, who's having a good season, and then one of Carson Soucy, William Borgen, or Cale Fleury. That's a decent decor, right? And that's a decor that can compete with a lot of teams in the NHL. So I would not be surprised to see Seattle make a big splash at the deadline. And I also wouldn't be surprised to see them in the hunt for maybe a defenseman instead of a forward, right? Jacob Chikrin. I wouldn't even be surprised if they called Anaheim and said, hey, you know what? Give us John Klingberg for a season. We'll take him on a rental. I can see that type of move happening where it's not where it's a cheap option for them, but they're still going to get decent production out of them. But if they want to go with term, because all their defensemen have term, or all their players have term, Jacob Chikrin makes a lot of sense. They could
I
afford to keep him, and
Yeah.
also they'd have to do is just re-sign Vince Dunn next season, which I don't think would cost them too much, and you'd have a really good 1-2 punch over there. So
Yeah,
that's
because
kind of how I see it.
look, in terms of their situation on RFAs and UFAs, they're in a good spot for next
Yeah.
season. They need to re-sign Morgan Geeky, 24 years old, Ryan
Right.
Donato, he's 26, he's a UFA. Daniel Sprong, he's an RFA. They mostly have RFAs. The
Yeah.
only UFA they have to sign is Martin Jones, Donskoy, and Sprong. They
And
have been
Carson
done.
Soucy.
Yeah, him too. Um, the rest of them are all RFAs. So Vince Dunn,
Yeah.
William Morgan, Cale Fleury, and the other ones we mentioned.
Yep.
For me, if Donskoy does return before the NHL trade deadline, I do believe that he's the man out. I think they could actually move him and get some assets and
I
use those
agree.
assets to acquire a defenseman. For me, look. For me, I'm saying down the middle is the weakest part because you have Ryan Donato and Yanni Gord who are center wingers. They're not natural centers. And then you have Alex Wenberg, who, in my opinion, okay, maybe he's a good, defensive, centerman, good shutdown defenseman. Even though he had a great season with Florida a couple of seasons ago, in terms of his offensive numbers. But I still feel like there's missing a punch in the middle. So adding a guy like Bo Horvat would be a great fit. Even you suggested Max Domi, but even him, he's not a he's not a pure center, and he's a center winger. You need a pure center, in my opinion. That's
So
just my opinion.
So one thing that I've also noticed, and this might be something that can be taken a look at. Now it's going to cost them for a couple of years, but it actually saves them money in terms of paying him the 5.9 million that he's owed. I would not be surprised if at the end of the season, to save some cap space and also to re-sign guys like Martin Jones and go with Martin Jones and Chris Drieger, they buy out Philip Grubauer. The reason I say that is because I don't think there's a value for Philip Grubauer right now with how bad he's played. And look, it would cost them a lot for a long time until 2030. It would cost them about $15 million total. But look, 2024, 25, actually 2023, 24, it cost them 600,000, which is nothing. 2024, 25, 1.1 million, not bad. 2025, 26, 2 million. But if you think about it, they're paying him a lot less than if they were to, let's say, give him his actual contract of 5.9 million. So I think that Seattle is in the running here to potentially buy out a guy like Philip Grubauer. And the reason I say that is because, you know what? If there's one problem they have, it's the backup goalie spot. And one goalie that's actually mentioned that's potentially available. Now, I don't think Seattle goes for a goalie, but if they do decide to go that route, there is a goalie from Arizona, actually,
Yeah,
that is potentially available in Karel Vejmelka. So, Seattle's got some options. I think forwards, just because of how much forward depth they have, I don't necessarily think they add a forward. I wouldn't be surprised if they do decide to go for a playoff run that they decide to get another goalie. That's if Chris Drieger doesn't come back. and
I mean,
Gru-
look, I think
Grubauer.
that's a dream essentially,
Yeah,
okay? Because,
but
he was
defense
out
makes
a
sense.
lot last year. He was out
Yeah.
for a while, and this season he hasn't even played a game if I'm mistaken. So, I mean, yeah, adding a goalie, in my opinion, I think that's more of an off-season move. Look, Jack Campbell's doing bad too. So maybe in
Yeah.
the off-season they consider doing a Philip Grubauer for Jack Campbell swap. I mean, that now I'm just
I don't
dreaming,
know,
but
but Grubauer's been awful.
yeah, I mean, so is Jack Campbell, even though
That's
he's had
true.
yeah, so we'll see about that, but I mean, that's too premature. That's just my own
Yeah, yeah,
trade
yeah. I
rumor.
just we were just we're mentioning
But
Seattle, but defense. I think defense makes a lot of
yeah,
sense to
in
pick up.
terms of defense, I think they're gonna go the cheaper route. I think Matt Dumba would be a good
Sure, Matt
project.
Dumba.
He kind of reminds me of Vince
Sure,
Dunn,
Matt Dumba.
where he has potential, but he didn't fulfill his potential with St. Louis. Then he went to Seattle, and then he became the player that they were hoping for. I think with Dumba, they could do the same thing too and sign him to an extension.
Yeah.
Um, Another guy I would say if they want an older option, and I know they had Mark Giordano in the past, but I think Luke Shen would be another cheap good option to add to their
Yeah.
decor. I don't expect them to go after Edmondson or Provorov or whatever. I don't think they're gonna do that. Chikrin makes sense long term, but I don't think they want to give up the assets at the same. You've got to take this into consideration. It's their second year. Do they necessarily want to get rid of all these assets that they just acquired in only
No,
year
of
two?
course, but if they want to go kind of what Vegas did, which is just throw all your eggs in one basket and just try to go for a cup, which I'm not saying is the right I think to do, but if they do want to go the Vegas route, they always can. So,
Look, so
that's kind of how I see it.
for me, at the end of the day,
Be
this is what it
fun.
comes down to. I think they need a pure center. Their
Mm.
wingers are one of the best wingers in the league.
Yeah.
I think they're good. No, don't add any more wingers. Puliarvi, whatever, forget
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, don't.
So whatever. In terms of defense, unless you don't get a young long-term defenseman, you're gonna have to go with a rental or a guy that maybe you sign for 2 3 years to an extension like Matt Dumba. But in terms of trades, that's what I would do. Goalie situation, I think it's gonna stay as is until the offseason. And in terms of where they finish in the standings, well, they're currently third in the Pacific. Do you think that's where they stay until the end of the season? They finish third in the Pacific.
You know what? Like, I think they could maybe even finish second. Their next couple of games coming up, they play Chicago next, and
I
they play.
think they finished second. I think the two expansion teams finished
Yeah.
first and second because look, Los Angeles is a good team. They didn't have the best start with the whole goalie situation,
Mhm.
but look, they Seattle has 4 games in hand compared to
Dude,
Los Angeles, and they're only 2 points away. For
that's
me,
it. And
it's a no-brainer. Yes, they're both on winning streaks. Los Angeles won 3 in a row. Seattle won seven. But at the end of the day, I think in terms of how good they are as a whole, look, they're plus 25. LA is just at
yeah, yeah,
zero
yeah.
in terms of their
It's
goal
between them and
differential.
LA, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
So we'll
So,
see what happens in this. But for me, they're a playoff team.
yep.
Will they win the cup? We'll see. But guys, we'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Where does Seattle finish in the standings? How far do they go in the playoffs? In my opinion, I just see a first round exit. But if anything's possible, if they could embrace that dark horse or underdog, image, I think they could go to as far as the second round, but we'll see. Time will tell. And in terms of the trade rumors, like we said, Bo Horvat's been connected. We mentioned all these names, but look for Seattle to be spenders, but not big spenders. They're gonna go for essentially rentals, more specifically in the defense department, and
Yep.
maybe add if they could, a center. We'll see what happens with that.
Agreed.
But guys, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Make sure to comment. We want to hear from the Seattle Kraken fan base, anyone who loves the Seattle Kraken or any of these players we mentioned, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Young Guns podcast.